Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of All Things Crime. I appreciate you watching and listening, whatever platform you're on, whether it's YouTube or Rumble, Spotify, wherever you're at. Appreciate you. And while we're here, why don't you click on that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. And for those of you that are really involved, throw me a some kind of a 5-star review. 4 stars just not allowed. So 5-star review, I'd really appreciate it. And let's get into the show. So today's guest is Cloyd Steiger. This man has been around the world teaching others how to investigate homicides, served, 20 some years with Seattle Homicide. I don't know, 40 years. What total, how many years did you have, Cloyd?
Well, 36 on the Seattle Police Department, then about 4 on the Washington State Attorney General's office, where I was head of the homicide investigation tracking system.
Yeah, so you've been around the block a few times.
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, is because you're one of the most experienced homicide detectives that I know. And plus, you're a good friend. I love having you on.
Yeah, good to be here.
Well, Cloyd, the reason that wanted to have you on also is because we ran into this headline up here. This is out of the Washington Post, and I just want to read this. So the first one, it says, neighbor of New York City maniac who butchered sibling 8 and stabbed parents speaks out. He never smiled. So basically, for those of you that haven't heard about this case, there's a 20-year-old, his name's Pedro Felix, or was, fortunately, in New York City, living there with his stepmom and stepbrother and father in an apartment in Queens. And this is on the 4th of July, too. So police respond to this apartment, and basically he had stabbed his little brother multiple times, stabbed his stepmom, and she had run out of the apartment screaming for help. And in the meantime, he had stabbed his father. And when the police arrived, well, Pedro, the 20-year-old, had his father in a headlock and a knife to his throat. And that's when police responded. They said then the police told him to drop the knife multiple times in both English and in Spanish. And he wouldn't do it. So one of the officers fired 1 round and injured him enough that he died from that wound. But when they got to the hospital, the 8-year-old and the 20-year-old had died. And then the parents, who were both stabbed, weren't critical, but it was bad enough that they obviously had to be hospitalized. So this is the scene that we're talking about. So well, first of all, what's your first reaction, Cloyd, to just hearing about this?
Well, I've actually been on cases exactly like this, where a guy about 20 years old goes crazy and starts stabbing everybody in the house or shooting people, and is killed by the police. Is kind of a very similar scenario on a beautiful summer afternoon. What I'd want to know is, what's the toxicology on this kid? The one I had, the guy was shermed, which means, they dip marijuana in formaldehyde and smoke it, and it just makes people crazy. And so I'd want to know what his toxicology was. And he was probably, I'm sure this was leading up to this point the whole time. The fact that it's a stepmother and stepbrother makes a lot of difference. Whereas if it was his birth mother and birth brother, probably been less likely to stab them like that, just because of that. There's an attachment. There probably was not an attachment to these two. Maybe he felt, I don't know how long they've been married, his mother and his father and this woman. Maybe he felt kind of like imposed upon by her and the kid, and there was resentment built up. And he's obviously got problems before this. You want to know what his
I'd love to see what his rap sheet is.
Yeah, and his school background and antisocial behavior, what his computer says, search what his computer searches were and see what kind of stuff he was doing. But terrible tragedy. And the thing about this is people don't realize that 90, probably 90, maybe even 93 or 4% of people who get stabbed don't die from it. But when you're a child and you're stabbed multiple times, the chances of hitting vital organs are much greater.
Yeah, well, they said he was stabbed in the chest.
Yeah.
So,
and so you're going to hit something. Whereas with an adult, you might miss, it might not hit anything that bad, or else it'll bleed out so slowly that you have a chance to rescue them and save them. The medical people do.
Yeah. Well, and I think the mother, if my math is correct, the father was 23 years older than the perp. But the mom was like 10 years younger than that. So she would have been, if it was his actual mom, she would have only been 13.
Yeah.
So I kind of deducted that it was, hopefully it was a stepmom.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think I read that it was a stepmom too. And it said half brother, but you're probably right. It was probably a stepbrother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that there's not as much of an attachment,
emotional attachment to somebody you were there when they were born and that type of thing. And, maybe raised up together. And whereas this kid he probably felt this kid came in and took all his attention away, that he was getting from his father. And this woman was to blame. And that's what boiled. I'm just speculating. I don't know anything about this kid. Yeah. But that sounds like a reasonable guess.
Yeah. Well, you've seen enough of those type of, again, that's why I thought you would be really good with understanding this case, because you've probably seen so many of these. So that kind of leads me to my next question is, you walk into, of all the stabbings that you've walked into, where there's obviously victims and it sounds like they removed the victims really quickly because there was a chance that they could have survived.
Right?
Yeah. But tell me what you think this crime scene looks like.
Well, for one thing, it's going to be very bloody because stabbings are bloody. There's probably blood all over the walls, blood everywhere, and furniture knocked over, chaotic. The one I was talking about, I remember walking in. Again, it was a beautiful summer afternoon, walking into the room, and there's a 18-month-old child dead on the floor, covered in blood. There's a bathtub that was almost full of blood because he took a 5-year-old in there and stabbed her repeatedly, although she ended up surviving. She was the only one in the family that survived. There's a 17-year-old boy dead on the couch. And then, of course, the suspect was dead on the street outside because when he pulled up, he had a gun. He pointed at the officers and they shot and killed him. And so it's just chaotic.
Oh, yeah. I've seen some, photos of those kind of crime scenes and it's amazing.
That smell of blood,
Yeah.
It's that metallic smell.
Well, which is almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
If you just go into a butcher shop, sometimes that smell is,
you got that smell. Yeah.
Bad enough. But, a crime scene
they
like
usually
that.
have big ventilation systems to take care of that.
Right.
But
yeah,
this house or apartment, and it's hot inside because it's a hot day and they don't have air conditioning.
And especially if they've been there for any length of time,
right,
it gets worse. So
yeah.
Well,
these are really fresh, but I've been to ones that were unbearable because of decomposition too.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't fully understand about both, just law enforcement in general, but specifically crime scene, the folks that actually have to process that crime scene after the crime. If it's
not what you see on CSI. I guarantee you that.
No, it's not even close.
Nice and clean, a couple splatters of blood.
Yeah. There's just blood everywhere. I mean, I think part of the reasons they wear Tyvek suits, which adds to the misery, of course, but
because it makes you hot.
Yeah. But it also just protects your clothing a little bit. It's like
does. Yeah.
Some of the, they have to kneel down and, whatever. Anyway, these crime scenes are pretty brutal, but
they're brutal,
every CSI and detective that I've talked to, they say one of the worst problems is the smell.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When you're watching it on TV, the sight of it, they can kind of recreate that. But even looking
Right.
at
You can't
pictures,
recreate the smell. No.
yeah, yeah, the different smells is yeah, it just adds to the horror of the scene, and
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
just can't be recreated. So
No,
I
it can't.
it's one of those things that you just look at Hollywood and you're like, yeah, you know what? You get another F on that one. So,
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
all right. So they walk into this scene. Take me to the perspective you think of these officers that are responding there.
The
I mean,
patrol officers,
how long were you just a street cop before you became a
10
detective?
years. 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you probably had incidents like this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You get there and it's chaos. The guy's screaming when you have a situation like that, a hostage, and you're a patrol officer and you're probably only armed with a handgun, that what you got to do, what you normally do, there's going to be a spot, usually the head, and you just have to take careful aim, and then when you're able, take that shot, because otherwise the hostage is dead. He's already killed the brother. He's tried to kill the mother. He's already stabbed the father. If you don't do something, this guy is dead. So you got to do it right away. You only have a second or two. You give him like 1 or 2 seconds to drop and surrender. And if he doesn't, it's over. That's the way it goes.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Not only had he already stabbed his father, but he also had that knife to his throat.
He was gonna cut his throat. And once he does that, I don't care if the medics are standing right there. His father's not going to survive if he cuts that throat.
Oh, it's a big knife too.
Yeah.
So he could have covered a lot of territory and just really.
That's why they had to do that. You get those. It's those shoot don't shoot scenarios that you train so often for. They have simulators, but it's not the same because of the chaos and your heart's beating 150 beats a second, and people are screaming all around you, and you got that one shot and you got to take it. So the officer was a hero that did this. He saved the father's life. Yeah,
and which is exactly what the neighbors said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he's put in that position. I'm sure the officer didn't want to be put in that position, but that's what you get paid for. That's what you're trained for. That's what happens. You get in there and you got to go.
Yeah. Well, did you personally have any scenarios where you had to pull the trigger like that?
No, I didn't. I was there when other officers did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my middle son, who was an officer at SPD, he shot and killed someone a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And it was same
That's
thing.
just brutal.
Yeah.
How's how was he able to handle that?
This guy had walked up on a teenage girl in the car, an absolute stranger, and shot and killed her. And then when the officers put up, he pointed the gun at them and shot. So it wasn't like some close call, and he just took it. But the guy was at like 70 feet away. So, they had to shoot pretty good, him and his partner, to get the guy, and they did.
And
70 feet is a long way with a handgun.
Oh, 70 feet's a long ways.
Long way. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Long way. Yeah.
And he
they
center mass kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, they hit him several times because they didn't just shoot once.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure, but still, to be able to hit anything
they hit him
with a
several
handgun,
times all over his body. But yeah.
Yeah. 70 feet. That's
a long, long way when you're firing a handgun. Yeah.
Most people don't understand how far that is for a handgun.
Most officer-involved shootings happen within 5 feet. You're 5 feet from your target,
Wow.
and go out to the range sometime and put yourself 20 feet from the target. It's hard to hit. A standing still target, not something that's moving, right? Yeah.
Well, I spent quite a bit of time at the pistol range, in the military.
Yeah.
And
it's up close. It's up close and personal. It's not for you got to have a rifle for a distance shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any kind of a rifle, that's a
yeah.
If you
70 feet
is
miss,
that's
for a rifle
that's
shot.
ridiculous. No. But if you're with a handgun at 70 feet,
that's a long ways away.
And I mean, in a real life scenario, the guy's not going to just be standing there for you.
No, that's why he fired at them, but he was way too far away and had no experience and didn't even come close. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, part of what I was, thinking about when I was reading these articles, and I'm just like, number one, it's just so tragic that a little 8-year-old boy is killed like this. And
I investigated 250 murders, and the only ones that ever get to me were the kids or the victims.
Yeah.
Those are the only ones that bothered me. Not that I didn't feel empathy for all of them, but the kids were the worst. Yeah.
Well, and it's because at that age, I don't care how unruly a child is
They're
at 8
still
years old.
innocent. Yeah.
They're still, there's no way that they deserved whatever they got, and
No.
who
And it
knows?
sounds like, not that it matters, but it sounds like this kid, oh, he was always happy and smiling and things like that. That's what the neighbors said. So, but it still
Yeah,
didn't matter. But I mean, that makes it even worse.
which
Sounds like
is
a kid.
which is actually the opposite of what the 20-year-old was.
Yeah, exactly. The opposite. The 20-year-old stoic, never smiled, kept himself, probably never, hardly ever come out of his room. That's why I'd want to look. I'd do a forensic dump on his computer and see what he's in his phone and see what he's been looking up and what's going on there. Of course, in these cases, you know, you do the investigation, but it doesn't really matter because there's not going to be any criminal charges, any trial. It's just trying to find out what happened.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads me to my one of the questions that I had when I was reading this is, okay, so what kind of circumstances are we looking at that, number one, the kid's really stoic, he's unfriendly. The neighbors said whenever they passed, he wouldn't even say hi, things like that.
Yeah.
What is it about this kid's circumstances that you think? Again, I'm basing this on the assumption that you've seen cases like this before,
Yeah.
that you've actually investigated. I'm trying to, bring these parallels, but most importantly is, as we're looking at this, okay, so I mean, not every quiet stoic type of a kid is going to be a
No.
mass
No.
murderer, but
No.
at the same time, if there's red flags that people can think about and see, then maybe they can help this kid
I
before.
guarantee you there were red flags in this situation, just nobody noticed them. When you go back in retrospect, you'll see it. Again, I don't know anything about this kid. Everything we're saying is speculation.
Right.
But I bet he had psychological problems, if not undiagnosed, most likely. I said this years ago. We were raising a whole generation of psychopaths, usually because it's not living with a mother and father, which isn't the case with this guy, although it's a father and stepmother, and they're out running the streets with no discipline or any rules at all, and so they just get this way. It doesn't sound like this kid was that way, but I don't know. That's why I want to know, what's he been searching on his phone, or is he playing kill 'em games and stuff, which doesn't, a lot of kids play those games and it doesn't do anything to them. But if you're the right, just happen to have the right personality, that could probably have an effect on you. The fake killing, which, it's no big deal, it's just fake. A lot of kids that are normal kids play these violent games. I'm not saying they should, but have no long-lasting effect because of it, because they're healthy otherwise. They have supportive parents and friends and things like that. But what was this guy? I bet you, was he alone, or did he have friends? And if he did, what were they doing? Was he on any kind of drugs? What was his search? What was his? Did he have fantasies of murder and stuff? He probably did. Again, only speculating. I don't know this kid at all or anything about him. So
No, but if you look all the way back to the Columbine shootings,
yeah, oh yeah,
those kids, clearly there was a lot wrong with them.
Yeah,
but the sheer fact that they obsessed over their video games,
yeah,
and it was all in the first person, so that the view that they had was always, from the backside of some kind of a weapon, so that they were literally shooting people, and it was very violent. But then they also just fantasized about actually doing it.
Right.
And,
yeah. Well, I had a different murder where an 18-year-old shot and killed a 17-year-old in front of his house. But this kid lived in $1 million mansion, and his parents were both Microsoft executives. But were there any signs? Well, yeah, he had an AK-47 on the wall of his bedroom and another rifle and guns. This 18-year-old letting him keep these guns in his house? And he was smoking dope constantly, and they ended up killing this guy, and he went to prison. That's the thing. It's just like, because they just were, like latchkey parents. They were always gone. But you can have more guns. And I'm not anti-gun, believe me, but you have to be a mature adult, right? Yeah, you have to be a mature adult and understand guns. But he was probably, I don't remember if he probably did play a lot of video games where he was behind a gun. But what's this kid got an AK-47 for, 18 years old, hanging on the wall? If only there'd been a sign, come on.
If only we had seen anything that would have
Yeah, there was no
indicated.
sign at all. People were shocked. No, they weren't. And when I interviewed, he'd been smoking so much dope. He was a constant state of lethargic, and couldn't think straight, and just
Well, and when you're in that kind of that level of drugs, then
yeah,
they're probably experimenting with other things, and then
probably.
and any
I'll
kind of
never forget.
psychedelic, something
He
like
asked
that.
for his attorney, and I had to figure out who his attorney was. So I finally figured out, yeah, that's her. And I called her up at like midnight. Yeah, we have what's his name in custody. Oh, what's the charge? And I said, she thought it was possession of marijuana. So I said, murder. And there was this long pause on the phone. She'd never handled a murder. She didn't know what she was doing. Yeah, what? What a shock to everyone, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, there's that case where the parents have actually been charged
Oh,
because
yeah. Because
they
they're so
enabled their
reckless.
kid.
Yeah, they're so reckless. And I have mixed feelings about that, but depending on the level of how much they ignore things and what's going on and how much they enable by buying them guns or things like that, that's another issue.
Yeah. Well, if you're buying your kid guns and you honestly don't have a really good assessment of the level of disturbance that this kid is,
Right.
yeah. Well,
That's a problem.
I
Now,
mean,
if
that's
you're
accessory, right? Isn't that what they were charged with? Accessory to murder?
yeah. Now, if you're a family that has guns and shoots and does it all together and goes out to the range and shoots, but you keep the guns yourself and you're just getting them familiar, I'm not opposed to that. But, just giving teenagers rifles is ridiculous. Just to go, especially in an urban environment. You're not out in the farm with your
most
22.
of America. You just described most of America, Cloyd, where
yeah, I know.
We have a bunch of guns and we take our kids out to the range and go shoot bottles.
Of course, I have guns. That's
a
but
fun afternoon to me.
I didn't give them guns that they had control of at 15 and 16 or 17.
Right. No, I don't know. I wonder some of these people, if they just don't understand what a gun can do.
They don't. It's like a prop. They see it on TV, or in a game.
Yeah.
You have to have a real respect for the weapon. The gun never killed anybody, but the person behind it does.
Yeah. No, a gun is just like anything else. It's
anything else, right?
I don't. They say guns kill people. No, they don't.
People kill people. Yeah.
Yeah. You set a gun down on a kitchen table, and it'll sit there for years before it kills anybody.
Nobody touches it. Yeah, it's not going to kill anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. That's.
When I was
I love that one
still
too.
Working as a police officer, my boys were young. I intentionally took my pistol out and laid it on the counter in the kitchen, unloaded, just to see what they do. And they kept screaming, "Dad, your gun's on the counter!" That's what I was looking for. I didn't want to pick it up, but it was a test, and it worked. And they were because I carried a gun like a wallet, right? So they were used to seeing guns all the time. They understood, and we told them early, "You don't ever touch this. It's a dangerous thing." And so, but you got to educate your kids about firearms. And the other thing I always tell kids is, if you're at your friend's house and he pulls out a gun that his dad has, run, go home, get out of there. Because I've handled those cases too, where a kid's showing his friend a gun and boom, it goes off and kills the friend. Because he doesn't know what he's doing. If your friend has a gun and wants to show you, you get the hell out of there and come home right now.
No, that's absolutely what they should do.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you get teenagers like that, and
and they think they know what they're doing.
And I actually have one like that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they're always trying to impress somebody else,
right?
And showing off, and doing stupid things, impulsive things, and then next thing you know, and
it affects the rest of their lives, right? You can never go back to that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, here it's going to be rapid fire here for you, because I'm wondering what the conditions are about, again, reverting back to this New York case. And I'm glad you brought it up, with the toxicology report, because if this kid, so you think that's probably one of the most telling signs?
That and his computer and phone searches, those combined are all equally telling.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk to the dad. What set him off that day? What happened? What was going on at your house that he all of a sudden went
Yeah.
off? Yeah, and the mom.
Well, especially why would he attack the 8-year-old first?
Yeah, because there was resentment there. That's why. Because this 8-year-old has taken the attention from his dad away that he got exclusively before the 8-year-old came around. Now, again, I don't know how long these people have been married. Is it a year? Or was this child born? I don't think if it's his dad's son also or daughter or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Then it'd be a half sister. But I'd like to know that. What's the relationship? And how long you've been married, and how was their interaction before this? Was he snippy at the sibling, or yelling at him all the time, or complaining about him? And what's going on with that? And what happened that day? What about that? It's 4th of July apparently. Had you been drinking, doing drugs? What were you doing at the house? Again, this is in Queens. It's a densely packed urban area. So
yeah,
that's what I want to know.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.